Hello and welcome to episode number 323. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. And of course, here is a very warm welcome to you. You are one of our premium listeners, and this episode was recorded especially for you. Thank you for being a subscriber. Do you use an Agile project management approach? And have you maybe noticed a certain fatigue, an Agile burnout, a Scrum burnout in your team? Well, Agile is indeed an excellent methodology that is responsive to business changes with quick turnaround and highly visible results. But at the same time, the pace of a project using Agile is relentless. It never seems to stop, and this is potentially one of the biggest Agile project management issues that the team may face. Unlike Waterfall, there are very few built-in times for team members to catch their collective breath and celebrate milestones. This Scrum burnout was the basis of the article Agile Fatigue, written by Kim Wasson. It's a relatively short article that contains some good tips on how to combat this effect. So in our interview, we are going to extensively talk about the following symptoms: burnout, meandering, stagnation, when the daily stand-up turns into a grind, and a secret move back to Waterfall. But more importantly, we're not only going to discuss them, but we're going to be discussing what to do about them in order to battle the burnout. And now, please stop yawning. Enjoy the interview. Hello, Kim. Welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here again.
We want to talk about Agile fatigue, and allow me to ask a somewhat sort of lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek, and maybe even not question: isn't it blasphemous to write something negative about Agile project management, and talk about Agile fatigue? Aren't you afraid you're going to be burned at the stake here?
Well, you noticed that I did do it. I posted it as a guest blog, not on my own, but
still has your name on it.
Yes, it does. My life, because of project management, is a series of postmortems. I know that there are retrospectives in Agile talk, but for me, I dissect everything. And if something's not working, I want to know why, and I want to know how to fix it. So I actually have a CIO of a company that I work with who always introduces me as, "This is Kim. She's the one who throws the skunk on the table." And that's me. This is the skunk on the Agile table.
Okay, so the article is titled Agile Fatigue. How did the article come about?
I have been working now as a consultant for about 10 years, and I've been on some long-term projects. And I've done multiple long-term projects, and now I'm coaching, and I started to see it on my own projects, and then I started to see it on the projects of some of the people I was coaching. And it's kind of ugly, and it's very, very understandable, but we don't make any allowances for it. And so I wanted to address it. I wanted to throw that skunk out there on the table and see if we can get to a point, because we don't want Agile to go by the wayside. It's a great process. It addresses so many of the problems of the old development processes, but it's a living, breathing thing, and you got to fix the things that are popping up. And you don't see this until someone's on a project long term.
Okay, so in the article, you describe a number of symptoms that all go along with Agile fatigue, and we want to review those and, of course, more importantly, what to do about them. The first one you mention is burnout.
Yes. Burnout is a huge problem. The thing with Agile is it just keeps coming at you, right? There's always the next iteration, the next sprint is coming at you.
It's 2 weeks, end of iteration, next iteration starts tomorrow, and it just keeps going and going and going.
There's no break. When you do Waterfall, there's that horrible crunch at the end, but then you celebrate. You feel like you've accomplished something, you take a break, you learn something new before you really dive into your next project, and you regenerate a little bit. And we don't have the chance to do that in Agile unless we make allowances for it. The pace is just so unrelenting. So what to do about it? What I try to do to combat it is, we've talked before about team goals. Set team goals. What is you want to accomplish as a team? Let the whole team be part of that. Publicize it, and then when you reach it, celebrate. And that can be as simple as, we want to hit the story points on the head. We want to be done the last day of the sprint, and we want it to be perfect. And if we hit that, we're going to have a party. It can be that simple. It can be as big as we're going to have a major release of our product go out, and we're going to stop and celebrate when that goes out. But make them and absolutely celebrate, big and small. If you can, move people. If you're in a company that has more than one Agile team, move people around. Like a lot of the things that I talked about in the blog post, it seems kind of counterintuitive. It seems like you're going to slow down your pace. It seems like it's not really a good thing to do. But in the long term, in the bigger picture, it's going to improve your project. It's going to improve the people. It's going to improve your velocity because people aren't going to be burned out. So if you can, move people among the teams, even if it's just for a sprint or 2 sprints. They get a different viewpoint. The other team gets a different viewpoint. They'll bring stuff back. And it just helps that entrenchment. It helps them remember why it is they like to do this. And this is another thing that seems really counterproductive, but set a periodic down sprint. Figure out how often you're going to do it. Maybe it's once a quarter. You have 2 weeks where people get to go investigate new things or take a class, or even it's a good time, if people have PTO, they can actually go on PTO. They can go out and realize that they're not missing anything. They're not going to come back to a big stack on their desk, whatever it is, but set a down iteration. Or if that's just politically impossible, which sometimes it is, rotate the down iteration from person to person. Everybody gets a chance on a rotating basis to have a down iteration where they go learn something new or whatever it is that they do. And they're not assigned other things in that iteration, or that sprint, so they're not worried about falling behind. And your velocity kind of straightens itself out really quickly when you do that, because it's always one person who's off investigating new technologies that might be of use in your project or whatever it is that they're doing. But you can see it. You can see that people, they're not excited. They look downtrodden. They seem tired. People are sick more. Those are all signs of burnout.
The second symptom of agile fatigue that you mentioned is meandering.
Yeah.
Are we talking about people just walking around the office here?
No, more, although definitely. I hadn't even thought about that in the physical term, but it does happen. When people are tired of what they're working on, they're going to go bother somebody else. Anything to keep from working on these things that I'm tired of working on. But they also start a task and get bored with it. And I saw this, and since the first time I've seen it more than once, when a project manager, a Scrum master has to go away for a few days, and they come back, and all the user stories in the sprint are open. Someone's working on all of them. Someone got bored, they moved to the next one, and then they get to the end of the sprint and nothing's done. Everything's in pieces. Or someone is bored and they look at the bottom of the list and see an interesting bug, and they're off, crawling down that hole and not making things work. And it really is that everything seems boring. It seems like they've done it before. So, it just happens. Project managers need to be vigilant for it, which is, I think most project managers are, which is why I think I see it more when people go away. But the best solution is to have a hard and fast rule about you get to work on one user story at a time unless it's blocked and I understand the block and we can't move it, or 2, or however that works, and then track it and take it away from them. If they pick up 3 and they're only allowed to have 2 and there's no good reason, move it back and make sure that everybody knows you're going to do that. Don't surprise them. That doesn't address the underlying fatigue part, but it at least will help you keep control of your project.
The third symptom is stagnation.
Yes. You're working on the same project. You're using the same tools. You have the unrelenting pace. Things are going to come at you. You stop taking the time to do what Covey called sharpening the saw. You stop taking the time to learn new things, to investigate new things, to read the journals, the blog posts, whatever it is that's available to you to investigate new things. And it's kind of hard to spot, but periodically what you want to do, another thing that seems counterintuitive, is assign someone to a task that's going to require them to stretch their skills. It's more complicated. It's a new tool. It's a new coding language. It's a new methodology. Yeah, it's going to slow down your iteration a little bit, but long term, it's what's going to keep people motivated and happy and working on it. And you can include that in your velocity. If you need to actually send someone out to learn something new, you can put in an administrative user story that's usually what I do so that we know, yes, we decided, and it's not going to, mess with our velocity. We allocated this many points and we can explain what we did with it. So you really have to watch for it. But also, if no one's coming up in meetings and saying, look, Ruby on Rails, we should look at this, or whatever the new thing is, you probably have stagnation just rampant across your team if no one's doing that.
The fourth symptom that you talk about is the one that I really am very interested in, because I think I have two teams where this is currently happening. The daily stand-up turns into a grind. It just seems like, do we really have to do this?
Yes. Yeah. And part of that is, the same old thing. And fixing this usually takes more from us as project managers or the Scrum Master. The first thing is kind of look at it and make sure that you're keeping it to what it's supposed to be. If it's more than 15 minutes, something's not quite right? So everyone should only be saying 3 things. A lot of times they'll get off track when people start to try to solve a problem in the meeting, and then everybody else loses interest, and it's hard to get everybody back on track. So, calling it, saying, great, at the end of the meeting, you guys get together and do this and report back to the team tomorrow on it. We don't want to, we can't do that here. That's a different meeting, but, good, go off and try to find it. Sometimes you get someone who runs on and on and on every day, and you want to take them aside privately and coach them on it. You can't do this. I'm going to say this. This is going to be your cue to stop talking. I'm going to say these words and you need to just stop. I appreciate you, but, we can't keep doing this. And finally, I try to make it fun. Do what you can. Tell jokes. I have a post from one of a fairly senior project manager that I work with in the Ukraine, and she does some really fun stuff. Kind of the equivalent of Monopoly money, story points for story points. Or one of the things that I used to do when I worked at eBay, and I don't know what their processes are now, but they didn't do Agile. They did something called train leaving the station, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it wasn't really okay to miss the train. And I had 5 departments of project managers, and every project manager had about 20 projects, and about 10 of them were active at any one time. And so when we had our monthly meetings, our monthly big team meetings, I got little ninjas, little, 2-inch high ninjas, and every project that was finished, someone got a ninja for. And it's a little thing. It cost nothing, but there were ninjas lined up on cube walls all over the place because it was fun. And it was a sense of accomplishment. So if we could try to do that, or at the very least, provide chocolate, food, food helps. They're going to want to come in if there's something to eat. I don't know why. It
helps.
It absolutely does. There's something really basic and communal about sharing food, and chocolate in particular. But if you are working with people in remote locations, you got to find a way to get them in on the fun. So even if you're putting up a cartoon or something, it can be silly. Even though you're marching through this, you could spend 30 seconds and do something silly. And the final thing is to maybe, if you have time at the end, if you haven't gone over your 15 minutes or whatever you have it scheduled for, see if someone's got something interesting to say. Let's go look at this new technology. Did you see this post? I'll send it out. Let's look at it. Something to make it not the same thing, even though that's the purpose. It is the same thing, but to vary it a little bit so that people, become interested in coming to it again, because it's part of the same stuff's coming at you. Part of Agile. It's the same thing every day. I've got to go to a stand-up every day. And it can be exhausting. So the more fun you can make it and the less painful you can make it, the better off your team's going to be, and the more happy they're going to be coming to it.
All right. And the 5th and final symptom of Agile fatigue. What? A secret move back to Waterfall?
Indeed.
Tell me about that.
I have seen this increasingly with long projects, particularly when you get to a point where you're replacing technology. You're upgrading to 64-bit. You are replacing the version, a major version of some middleware or your UI display technology or something like that. Suddenly, you have massive user stories that are not broken down, and they carry on. They just move from. I'm shocked. They just move from iteration, from sprint to sprint. You got no velocity anymore because everybody's working on 64 bits, so we don't need to do that. And suddenly QA's got nothing to work on. You're not breaking it down, you're not handing it to them. And I think of it as the snake swallowing the pig, right? There's this big lump in the middle. And when you get done with the technology, your QA group is still trying to swallow this pig. And you're going to start working on other things. You're used to dragging these big user stories. You're not breaking them down anymore. QA can't work on them anyway because you just handed them this huge thing to test all at once. And it turns out looking just like Waterfall. It's absolutely amazing, and nobody sets out to do it, but I'm seeing it over and over again. And part of it may be the combating the, relentless, it's coming at me. Part of it may be breaking down purely technical user stories is a little harder than breaking down functional user stories. It takes some work. And it's, you often get senior developers with the don't worry your pretty little head about it, we got it, mentality, and they can't do it. This is where it ends up. You end up back in Waterfall, but you call it, you end up loading your sprints a quarter ahead of time, and then it's really hard to move things around instead of utilizing the backlog the way it's meant to be used. People estimate things not in story points, but they're doing hours, so they don't want to change it, and they want everything really defined in the backlog when you don't really need it all defined. So it's really insidious. And the only reason I saw it was I went away from some projects for a while, and then they brought me back in because they were having trouble. And I looked at it and went, look at this. How did you get here? And that's what it is. And now I'm looking for it, and I could catch it a little earlier. So it's hard to recover from too. You really have to just nail it. You have to stop everything in its tracks and say, we're going to break it down. We're starting now, this sprint today. I know it's hard. We're going to do it. And we're going to celebrate when it's done.
So we have burnout, meandering, stagnation, the daily stand-up turning into a grind, and a secret move back to Waterfall, all as symptoms of Agile fatigue. Do you see all of these all the time on Agile teams, or do some teams just show one or two of these?
Some teams show one or two. Sometimes the individuals on the team show different things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this is contagious. One person's burned out and unmotivated. Somebody else can't get the information they need from that person, and they get frustrated and burned out, and they can't finish their stuff, and more stuff's coming at them. So it really can cascade. If you have a really cohesive team, you'll see all of it kind of all together. But a lot of times I see different things with different people. So it's just when you've been on a project for a while, you just have to be on the lookout.
The recommendations you had in terms of what to do about the various symptoms, they're sort of, you have to do them as the Agile coach or the Scrum Master or whatever you're being called
right.
in your particular position there. Is there something that we can do at the core of Agile to, help teams overcome these, to make them aware this is going to happen to your team? And here are some procedural solutions that we recommend from, the core of Agile, the core of Scrum. These are additional steps that you should apply on your projects in order to avoid this fatigue? Or is this just something that, well, it's going to happen, you are responsible for it on your own team?
No, I would really love to see this be a core part of Agile. I think the moving people around, the periodic down iterations for either individuals or for the team, if those were built in, I think we would largely avoid the problem if we could do those two things. Give people time for learning like we used to do, and give them a new viewpoint whenever you can.
Okay, finally, give our listeners 2 to 3 ideas on how to approach their own Agile teams, to determine, have we contracted Agile fatigue here?
Deadly disease. Yes, absolutely. First, look at your tracking. Whatever, if you're using Pivotal or Rally or whatever it is you're using, Greenhopper, look and see, are the user stories typically done in priority order, which is how you want it? Are you seeing consistency in the story points, or are they starting to drag? Are people estimating higher for the same kind of user stories? Because that'll start to tell you that they're getting tired. Have you seen any velocity changes? And are you dragging user stories from sprint to sprint? Even if you're closing one and opening a new one, do they keep going? Because then they're not being broken down properly. Look at your team. This is really easy. Do they have a lot of energy? And are they, or are they looking tired? Do they get sick a lot? Do they drag? Do you have trouble getting people into your daily stand-up? Do they, just straggle in, or are they all there ready to go and get back to work? And finally, this is kind of touchy-feely, but listen to the chatter about the project. Do they talk about the project? Is it hopeful? Are they thinking about new ways to do things? Are they helping each other? Or are they, wandering around talking about, the weekend or, something else, or just not talking? So listen to the chatter. And if they're not talking and they're not enthusiastic about what they're doing, you're probably starting into this deadly disease. So those are the three things that I would go out and try to do right away. They're easy.
Kim, thank you so much for your time and your tips.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
And that was our interview with Kim Wasson on Agile fatigue and Agile burnout. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And if you are a PMP or PGMP and you're looking for a simple and effective way to earn your PDUs, then try the PDU podcast. Get a new webinar and at least one new PDU every month on autopilot. Stop by at pducast.com. That's pducast.com. And finally, we have this. It's always easier to talk about change than to make it. Until next time.